complications. Like I was saying, it becomes very difficult for different treatments if in the case of having to treat something that may have attacked the actual brain tissue. So, like I was saying, this barrier that gets created, the barrier, the structure between the blood supply and then the actual nerve cell itself, that glial cell that's working in that region, its goal is to make sure that anything that comes through, rather than getting to slide around or move around the cell, that it actually has to move through that glial cell first, so that that material hopefully is getting stopped before it makes its way to the nerve cell. That's the overall goal. So those 2 points of entry, the first point of entry being the actual blood supply to the brain tissue itself. And as we move into studying the blood vessels, you'll see this, that the blood supply, like the base of the vessels of the brain and everything, they are huge amounts that are present. So we're trying to make sure that we block anything that might come from that blood flow directly. And then the blood flow that makes its way to those ventricles, to make sure that we try to protect it at those capillary levels also. So the barrier system works very hard to keep the brain tissue safe. So now, as we move into areas of the brain, well, the way that we're going to work to talk about the parts, the components of the brain, we're going to look at our hind brain and then midbrain. And we're going to work our way basically up to this big portion, the cerebrum, okay? So we're going to start with these areas that we call the primitive portions, okay? We're going to start with those first and work our way up to what is our seat of consciousness, okay? Basically the area that we tend to associate with brain. So, looking at the makeup of the hindbrain and the midbrain, going from rostral to caudal, okay? Now, our medulla oblongata, fun term to say, gotta admit, okay? So, that's going to be starting at my foramen magnum and ending at the pons, up here at the front of my brain stem. Now here's the cool thing about the medulla oblongata. And I used to make a, you know, because I think about everything, you can't say medulla oblongata for me, not think about a particular movie, but I found out I've gotten too old for that, I'm too old now. When I say it, most of the students kind of look at me and think, what? So, medulla oblongata, as we're looking at our structures and as we're thinking about this brain as a whole, medulla is going to be our point where we're going to start at the spinal cord. Now, think about this. This is our point for all fibers, okay? Connecting my brain to my spinal cord to pass. All parts. That connection between all of this to spinal cord. All those fibers. When we talk about ascending. Ascending means moving up, okay? Those are going to be known as our sensory, all right, first order. Descending, going down, mostly fibers, okay, is from the cerebral cortex going to skeletal muscles because that's so busy, okay? So a lot of those fibers that are descending, that's their destination, all right? But don't forget, we've got the other muscle of the body also. It's just a tad bit more complicated. We're going to find neural networks for both sensory and motor functions. Because we're looking at the medulla oblongata, the sensory information that will work through this area: hearing, equilibrium, touch, pressure, temperature, taste, pain. Motor, that this area of the brain will work with: chewing, salivation, swallowing, gagging, vomiting, respiration, that one's going to be kind of tricky, speech, coughing, sneezing, sweating, cardiovascular, gastrointestinal, head, neck, shoulder movements. Now, what we're going to learn is that in some of these areas of this brain stem, what we're going to learn, because I'm going to refer to this as primitive, okay? You're going to find throughout this primitive region control centers. So for example, this area, respiration and so forth, we're going to find throughout the brainstem centers that will play major roles in maintaining systems for homeostasis. Yes, no, maybe? Okay, so the other part about this, we're going to see something called the reticular formation. The reticular formation is going to be this diffuse web of these nuclei throughout this brainstem area. Okay? So, because in this brainstem area, we're going to be dealing with so many control centers, okay? We're going to find that it's going to help, of course, with breathing, gastrointestinal. We're going to have cardiac. We're going to have vasomotor centers, meaning skeletal muscles. This is why, for the most part, if someone has damage to their brain stem, most likely they're not going to survive. Because in the area of the brain stem, because of the control centers that are present, damage to them, you can't repair. As I doubt very seriously a neurosurgeon is going to go anywhere close to the areas of the brain stem because of the delicacy of the nature of the tissue and all of the control centers that are present. If they do, let's hope they know exactly what they're doing. I mean, you don't, you'll kill them. Yes. And, brain surgery is scary enough as it is. I mean, I don't particularly like that if somebody cutting the top of my head off, right around in there with a stick. Okay? But, it happens. It's how we learn a lot of information. Okay? Now, looking more at this area, the pons. The pons is this bulge up here at this anterior portion. On the posterior, it's got some really thick stalks that are present. It does connect my cerebellum. Basically, when we're looking at the bulge that's existing, what we're going to see is we get a connection to my cerebellum and midbrain. Another area of my brainstem. Once again, has reticular nuclei of the reticular formation. It's going to have the tracts of white matter because we're still dealing with information moving in, motor information going out. Now, it has the ability for fascicles, the axons, to cross between the left and the right of the cerebellum. So it has the ability for information to cross as it's moving, to go from one side of the cerebellum to the other because of the connection that's present. Longitudinal axons, fascicles, they're going to carry sensory and motor information up and down. This can deal with hearing, equilibrium, taste, facial sensations, because as we move into the cranial nerves, we're going to see connections for cranial nerves. Okay? We're going to see eye movement, facial expressions, chewing, swallowing, urination, secretion of saliva, tears. In this region of the pons, that reticular formation, they think they're finding a lot of information about it, being concerned with sleep. Don't know about y'all, but I like that. Respiration, and then posture. The reason for that is the pons connection to the cerebellum. And the cerebellum is going to have the ability to affect our posture because of what it does, the cerebellum itself. The midbrain, the short segment of that brainstem, it'll connect hindbrain to forebrain. It has some peduncles. They're going to help anchor that cerebrum to the brainstem, because it looks like the cerebrum just simply sits on top of that brainstem, even though there's a little more connected than that. We're going to see connections get formed so that fibers can go to and from my cerebellum for fine motor control. Once again, skeletal muscles. Okay? We're going to see that there will be connections through substantia nigra. This is going to be through the thalamus and nuclei, basal nuclei, and they help prevent unwanted body movements. The reason that this is known, okay, is due to a lot of research that has been done for Parkinson's. Anybody familiar with Parkinson's? What happens to people who are diagnosed with or what happens as the disease progresses? They're going to get a lot of the tremors, okay? They get weakness. Now, what they're finding is that due to, now, substantia nigra and thalamus and basal nuclei, these are areas of nerve cell bodies, and what happens is they're finding that they degenerate, and this is what leads to that shaking and the tremors and so forth. And as the disease progresses, it leads to making those tremors, which they can't control.